Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. This is part 2 with BK on here. I already got the subscribe button up there for you, BK. What's good, baby?
Appreciate that. You're too kind, Steven. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate all the plugs and appreciate you allowing me to be a small part of this channel, man.
It's awesome. It's awesome. We're both gonna be out there at the stadium, orange-white scrimmage this Saturday. What is that? April 24th at DKR.
24th.
I'm bad with dates. I believe it's the 24th.
Well, that's why you have me on, right? I'm here.
Yes.
I'm the dates guy. That's my only purpose on this channel, to be the dates guy, to remind you of important dates on the Texas athletics calendar. I got you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So for those of you who are coming here after watching our first video, we covered the offense. And if you have not gotten a chance to, while you watched our offensive video, make sure you subscribe to my channel as well. You may or may not know we're on our way to 10,000 subscribers. Please come along the journey. We don't ask for much, but we're giving you BK. We're giving you offense and defensive breakdowns. Just a couple excited fans to see some football this Saturday. BK, going to the defense. And I'm going to put up the same thing. What are you looking to see on the defensive side of the ball? I'll kind of roll off of you wherever you want to start, my man.
Can I cheat and say everything? Is that too much of a cop-out?
Can you clarify what you mean by everything, sir?
Yeah, you know, the linebacker position is, I think, the position most Texas fans will have their eyes on this weekend. That's just the position of gravest concern right now. Not a lot of depth there, not a lot of proven talent there, just not a lot of known commodities in that linebacker room right now. So very curious to see what that bunch looks like on Saturday. We know DeMarvion Overshown is not going to be participating in the spring game. He's been out all of spring. Now, I think everybody feels good about DeMarvion Overshown come the fall if he can stay healthy, which thankfully he stayed healthy last year and became one of the most impactful pieces on this Texas defense. By the way, got to give some love to Agent Zero, or the Arm Bandit, as I call it. Arm Bandit. How many armbands was that guy rocking last year?
13, 14, something crazy.
If he plays as well as he did last year, I don't care. He can wear 100 of them. That's fine by
Alamo Bowl MVP.
He was spectacular. And just consider, like, the fact that he made that position change without a spring. I mean, we had no idea what to expect from DeMarvion in the fall. But, yeah, to do that, no spring practice, and to ball out as much as he did, he became the best linebacker on the team last year. So, tip of the cap to DeMarvion Overshown, man. That guy worked his ass off, and we all reaped the benefits from his performance last fall. So I feel good about him, but who else, right? And we all thought Juwan Mitchell was going to be that other linebacker. He was the other starter from last year's team. And look, going into the spring, we figured he was going to be a part of the roster this fall. Well, that's not the case. Enter the transfer portal. I don't think we have an announcement on where Juwan Mitchell is going at this point, but by all accounts, he's not going to be here. So who's going to step up? Who is going to step up and be that other starting linebacker? And once again, in the spring game, no DeMarvion Overshown, so you'll have plenty of opportunities for the other linebackers on campus to show out. So Jalen Ford, what are we going to see from him? David Benda, heard his name a bunch this spring. What's he going to bring to the table? And who else? You know, Jet Bush, I've heard his name a couple of times. Like, who is going to step up at that linebacker position? Steven, for me, that is, once again, the position of gravest concern on defense. I want to see how those guys look on Saturday. And the hope is they don't look completely outclassed or overmatched going up against the ones of the Texas offense.
For me, specifically with the linebackers in the – I said the word this time.
Specifically.
Yep. Well, in the run game. I ain't going to try to again.
Should we stop the video right now? Like, have we peaked? Are we done today?
I surprised myself. I'm so happy. Anyway, in all seriousness, in regards to the linebackers, their run fits, I need them to have solid run fits. You know, the Bijan video was dope, but you see people all over the place. And I know that's not the starting group, but we have a lot of guys, a lot of names being thrown about. In regards to Overshown, I'm bummed that he missed this spring because he does have a change in the defense. He does have a change with his position coach. Coleman Hutzler did a lot of magic that I think he never got enough credit for as the position coach last year for the LBs. Yeah. Just what he was able to get out of Juwan Mitchell, what Overshown developed into over the course of the season in game every single week. You have to give some credit there to the coaching staff and Coleman Hutzler as well. Jeff Choate being in there, I don't think you have any drop off whatsoever. The success he's had as a head coach and working under Pete Kwiatkowski, like I expect them to be rolling at some point at that position, especially holding those recruits in there at bay, the recruits that they have. But those brothers are small and they're not going to be ready to play this year physically. I do think David Benda is going to be an upgrade from Juwan Mitchell, me personally. The things I like what I saw from him last year, to be honest with you. At the end, he was able to get turnovers.
Yeah.
Like that matters to me. Can you be a magnet to the ball? He didn't seem to be all over the place with run fits. He's not perfect, but I need that to at least be on point so we're not getting gashed and exploited. Because I do think up front with Coburn and Alfred Collins and Sweat and Broughton, all these people, you have a lot of protection up front with your guys. Mm-hmm. So I need that person that is a good tackler and knows where to be. I think that's going to be a big thing that these guys are looking for is just, can you be there on time? And then the other guy being able to make plays in terms of that overshown position. The Jalen Fords of the world, the Marcus Tillman Jr.'s of the world, the Jalen Hullabees of the world. Shout out to Jalen Hullabee getting Student Athlete of the Week last week. I'm happy for these guys. They got to prove themselves because they're on watch, because you don't want the coaches to say, you know what, they already got a Gofo coming in from Notre Dame. They already got, I think Ben Davis might be enrolling from Alabama. They are not afraid to hit up that portal like our boy Chris Beard and say, I don't like what I'm seeing. I want to go get somebody else. They're not going to wait for y'all.
Right.
They're not waiting for y'all. So you're going to have to come through with it at the linebacker positions. But there's a couple of people like David Benda that I'm very, very encouraged by.
You know, I'm slightly worried about the departure of Jalen Mitchell, but I'm not terrified, if that makes sense. Like, I think the ceiling for David Benda / Jalen Ford is higher than the ceiling for Juwan Mitchell. Because Juwan Mitchell was consistent, but we knew what he was. Like, he had his limitations.
Very limitations. Yep.
Not great in space. You talked about the run fits. He wasn't great in coverage. Like, he was just an adequate replacement level player last year. And for Texas, look, that was enough. I mean, honestly, he played better than I thought he would going into the season. But you can upgrade from Juwan Mitchell. I just feel like the floor might be lower for those guys, for the Jalen Ford, David Benda combo, just because we haven't seen that over the course of a full 12-game season. So, yeah, I think if one of those guys, if two of those guys can step up, then this linebacker room has a chance to be even better in 2021 than it was in 2020. And I agree with you on the Coleman Hutzler love. That guy maybe walked into the toughest situation in terms of all of the new position coaches that got hired to Tom Herman's staff last year. And I thought he did a really good job considering the lack of pieces he had to work with. But still some questions in terms of personnel in that linebacker room. There's a chance for that group to be better, but also a chance, if neither of those guys can be consistent, that that linebacker room takes a little bit of a step back. And man, there's so many great offensive minds in this conference. If they know you have a weakness on defense, they'll attack it time and time and time again. We talked about Iowa State a few minutes ago. You know, those guys with all the tight ends that they have, like, they're going to attack the linebackers. That's what they did last year against Texas. They made it a mission to go after Juwan Mitchell and put him in awkward pass coverage situations, and it worked. So there's some smart offensive minds in this league. If they notice that the Texas linebacking core isn't cut out, and if that's the weakness of this defense, they're not going to hesitate to go after that time and time again. So hopefully Pete Kwiatkowski can find a way to get it done. And I will say this, Stephen, I'm excited about Pete Kwiatkowski. I think everybody is. You know, this is far from the most talented defense that Texas has ever had, but I think PK has had more success with lesser talent going back to his time at Washington. And he has developed some dudes. I mean, he has developed some unheralded recruits into NFL players. So that excites me the most. Like, even though Texas is losing a ton of production on defense, the two starting safeties, we talked about Juwan Mitchell, obviously Joseph Osai, the most important player, the best defensive player in the conference last year. Like, those guys are going to be tough to replace, but I feel like PK is going to do a good job and get the most out of this defense. So with his track record, you talked about Jeff Choate as well. Hopefully those guys can find somebody, some rotation at that linebacker position to ensure that there's no serious drop-off without Juwan Mitchell.
Can I be the fan that just oversimplifies this real quick?
Do it.
I'm hoping that we just get the fortune of the whole Texas year one defensive coordinator thing. And I know Chris Ash wasn't, at the beginning it was rough, but where the defense ended up getting to, I thought they were excellent down the stretch of the season. Even in the Iowa State game, I know they had their problems, but they didn't lose to Iowa State because of the defense, in my opinion. And down the stretch, they were able to really get better and better and better with the COVID situation. So I think if Chris Ash had more of an offseason last year, who knows how good that defense would have been to start earlier on. But you go back to like Manny Diaz year one, Vance Bedford year one, Todd Orlando year one, where he gets the extension. Mm-hmm. Like, we just have this thing with year one defensive coordinators where it just falls into place. And I'm hoping with some of the veteran leadership he does have, because I think the common thing with those guys is they did weirdly have a lot of experience every time they did take over, where guys were ready to play. If you look at each one of those, they had a lot of junior upperclassmen, guys that were already ready to go. This is there's a mix. You have the Coburns of the world, you have the Josh Thompsons of the world, you have Jameson, but they do have to figure out the linebacker thing, DeMarvion Overshawn or not, right? Yeah. You have to figure out where your pass rush is going to come from in the situations where you're rushing for. We know PK has some heaters in his pocket for certain situations, but you don't want to turn into Todd Orlando where it's like, damn, I can't get pressure with 3 or 4, so I got to go to a heater every single time it's time to get pressure. Like, I need the Ray Thorntons of the world to win. I need the Jacoby Jones of the world to win. And I know Joseph Osai only had 5 sacks last year, but that's not the point. It's the pressure.
Yeah.
It's the pressure he was able to get consistently. Then it turns into the attention that you have to allocate to that player. Now Ojimo is getting sacks on the other side. Now his name is not even being mentioned right now, but when he was on that other side playing strong side defensive end, he was able to get pressure. Taquan Graham was able to get pressure because they all got one-on-ones now because everybody's worried about 46.
Yep.
Who's going to be that guy? And we talked about Jatavian Sanders on offense when he gets here. But right now we've heard good things about Ray Thornton. But is Ray Thornton eating because he's that dude? Or is he eating because we're trying to figure things out at tackle?
Yeah.
That's the big question mark of the spring that happens when you have somebody filling in for a guy who's a consistent All-American like a Joseph Osai.
It's a great question. By the way, I love your oversimplification of the defensive coordinator at Texas. That's perfect. That's perfect. I mean, and I hope it's right. I hope that trend continues this year. Year one, it's always the defensive coordinator's great. We got to extend him. We got to do whatever we can to make sure he doesn't leave. He cannot leave. He can't take a head coaching job elsewhere. That would be disastrous. Then he comes back for year two, and year two, you start to see some cracks. Then by the time year three rolls around, the dam bursts altogether.
Quick side note before you get to your point.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want to forget this.
Shoot.
Hopefully, Chris Del Conte has gotten us out of that business.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Hopefully. Unless you're winning a conference championship or you're in the playoffs, I don't want to hear about extensions.
No.
I don't care how well they're doing. Let it play out.
Agreed. That's been a huge problem with this athletic department over the last few years, right? Giving guys extensions way too early. I mean, Shaka Smart got an extension after his first year in which he lost as a 6 seed in the first round of the NCAA tournament. It's like, how does that qualify you for a contract
he beat North Carolina
unbelievable.
In November.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's frustrating. And I agree with you. Hopefully CDC gets us out of this mess. And it's funny, like CDC has done so many good things. We talked about that in our first video together, kind of the state of the Texas athletic department. Definitely check that out if you missed it. I would love nothing more than for CDC to give every defensive coordinator like a 2-year contract, maybe even like a 1-year contract. I know no DC would accept that, at least no DC in their right mind, but that would crack me the hell up. Yeah, like maybe that could end the curse of this like year 3 defensive coordinator problem. Like keep acting like these guys are in year 1 by giving them 1-year deals time and time again. Probably not going to happen. I digress. But yeah, I'm excited about Pete Kwiatkowski. But to your point, yeah, who's going to replace Joseph Osai? Look, not one player is going to replace Joseph Osai. I mean, that dude, consensus All-American, he was doing things we hadn't seen in this conference since Ndamukong Suh. I mean, that game he had in Stillwater was unbelievable. One of the best individual defensive performances that I've ever seen, not just from a Texas player, not just from a college player, like from a football player anywhere. That dude was a man amongst boys. He almost single-handedly won that game for Texas. up in Stillwater last year. And of course, he had
sack.
Yeah, the game-winning sack. On fourth down in overtime against Spencer Sanders.
Clearly called the play to get away from him.
And he still got there. So there's not one guy on this roster that's going to replace Joseph Ossai. The hope is a combination of guys can get close to replicating the success that Joseph Ossai had. And yeah, that's a big question, Steven. We've heard Ray Thornton's name a lot. We've heard Jacoby Jones's name a lot. You just mentioned those cats. How good are they? Like, Jacoby Jones did a couple of good things last year. He showed me something, and
Flashes.
I know, he's been a college player. This is year 5 for him. I think year 3 at UT. He's a former JUCO kid. So, maybe the experience has paid off, and maybe he's going to be a consistent player. But, I just haven't seen him over the course of a full season show me that consistent splash play ability. And then Ray Thornton, we know he's good. I mean, he was on that. He was like a significant – not a super significant, but a contributor
on that rotational piece.
Yeah, on that LSU national championship winning defense in 2019. But rotational piece is probably fair. Like, he wasn't Caleb Chason. Like, he wasn't one of the best players on that defense. He was probably a highly touted recruit because he played at LSU, but he could barely crack the starting lineup at LSU. So, how good are those guys? To me, neither of those guys are close to Joseph Ossai. And your question is very fair. Are they actually really good, or are they just dominating because Texas doesn't have its ish together at the offensive tackle positions right now? So I feel great about the interior of the defensive line, and maybe you're going to get to that in a second. But with Coburn and Alfred Collins and Ojima, there are so many talented pieces on the interior of this D-line. It's not even funny. But on the outside, you got to have pressure coming from the edge. You have to have those matchup nightmares, those guys who can draw double teams and make life easier for the other cats on your defensive front, and also make life easier for your linebackers and your back end guys as well. I'm not sure Texas has that. And to be honest, Steven, I'm not going to be sure until the fall. Even if Ray Thornton and Jacoby Jones have 2 sacks each on Saturday and look great,
that's a good point.
It's going to be, maybe our offensive line sucks. So
it's
really,
still a question mark, right?
Exactly.
I think that is totally fair. It is still a question mark until there's live bullets. That's totally fair, because the weird thing about spring games is you're evaluating 2 groups at the same time that are yours.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is something, while we're not going to be able to pay attention to every single meticulous detail on our first watch, especially being at the stadium. This is something that's going to have to come from rewatching the tape, from the bit we get to see, because we haven't seen what the practices that the coaches are already consistently rewinding on throughout the summer from their scrimmages. So that's a great point. One of the things I wanted to also bring up, because this is kind of twofold, and I mistakenly put my buddy Landon's channel up there earlier, but shout out to Lando. But he made this point on a video we actually recorded a little while ago together about the lack of sacks in the Big 12 that pass rushers get in general because of the nature of the offenses we play and how quickly the ball comes out.
Yeah.
People are going to look at it and be like, oh, this person only had 5 sacks. Or I think the Big 12 over the last 5 years, he said, has produced maybe 5 guys who have had double-digit sacks over the last 6 years. It's a crazy number because the ball's coming out so fast in our conference as opposed to other conferences. The point is the pressure.
Yeah.
That's what I'm paying attention to. And when I talk about pressure with Joseph Ossai, the example that Brad just used here about Oklahoma State was game planning for Joseph Ossai, and he still wrecked the game plan. Ray Thornton, you can be good, right, and catch somebody, but can you be good when somebody game plans for you all week?
Right.
When they've studied your technique and they know what your counter moves are. Same thing with Jacoby Jones, where they've game planned for you guys, because we've seen that here at Texas before. We don't have that natural pass rusher, and guys can get taken out of the game. And it's like, damn, have you heard for so-and-so for 2 or 3 quarters? That's when you see stuff like that. But when you had a Joseph Ossai, you never asked yourself that, because he would splash even if he didn't make the tackle. You see him shoot the gap, and it's like, oh, that was 46 right there, even though Overshown made the tackle or Juwan Mitchell made the tackle. So that's something we've got to see. I do think that these guys' job will be aided by the fact that the interior is so good, because I do know what I have in Keandre Coburn. I know I have a future star in Alfred Collins. I know that. And I know what he can do against the run and the pass. I know Vernon Broughton's coming right behind him.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I have in Tavondre Sweat, where I don't have that drop off with my nose. Ojimo, we talked. He was my starting. He's now been relegated to wherever he can try to get snaps, right? So that interior aspect, Bo Davis in that group, Bo Davis coming in, they're going to have to eat. They have, that is an absolute necessity. And I think if the better that those guys do, the easier it is going to be to run games and do all the things outside that those edges will be able to do, including Ja'Tavion Sanders when he gets here.
It's a great point. Yeah, those defensive tackles can be the guys drawing double teams to make life easier for the edge rushers, right? It doesn't have to work to where your edge rusher is your most feared player on the defensive line. It can be the guy straight up the gut. And a lot of quarterbacks will tell you that that's the pressure they hate the most.
Interior pressure
coming right in their face. So, yeah, I feel great about what Texas has on the interior of that defensive line. But, yeah, someone has to be that impact player on the edge for Texas. The interior is going to be the strength of this defensive line, no question. But you need at least one of those guys to bring you consistent play game in and game out. And I'm with you. Sacks, overrated stat. Anywhere.
Especially in the Big 12.
But especially in the Big 12. So if you can make things happen for the other 10 guys on your team, and if you can just create pressures and wreak some havoc in the backfield, that's fine. You don't need to get that sack added to your stat sheet. Just make some things happen in the backfield. Hopefully Texas has that there. I will ask you this, though, Stephen. You know, it sounds like you're with me to where you're in kind of wait till the fall and see mode with Jacoby Jones and Ray Thornton.
Yes.
What about the depth at edge? Like, we're talking about starters right there. Like, what about the depth at edge beyond those two guys? I mean, do you feel like Texas might have something there, or are we in a situation where if one of those two goes down,
great point,
Texas is in some serious trouble?
I actually think the best natural pass rusher is Prince Dorbah. And I was a big fan of his coming out of Highland Park and what he did when they won state, I think in 5A. And the problem is Prince Dorbah, it's really difficult to have him in there on first and second down, really. I mean, depending on run situations, especially when you're playing teams like Iowa State or Kansas State or West Virginia. But there's going to be times, and I think this is also going to be going back to one of the conversations you and I had about the wide receivers and pigeonholing people. This may be a thing where, hey, 1 week when we're playing Texas Tech, I'm going to go Prince Dorbah, maybe even over a Ray Thornton, or I may have to go Gofo over Jacoby Jones, depending on how the matchup plays out. But the depth there isn't crazy. That's why I think if you're a Ja'Tavion Sanders coming in, you're kind of – because the conversation's going to shift this summer into where is he practicing?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be a big talking point, right, amongst fans, because he's the signature player of the 2021 class and our 5-star, the guy that's stuck with us. But he's also a weird two-way guy. That's not a DB wide receiver two-way guy. He is a tight end DN two-way guy, right? But we're also at a position where there's a lot of question marks where he's coming in. And can he help out in that rotation? Even some of the other freshmen that are unheralded right now, can they have an opportunity to come in and flash, maybe with some speed, or bring something to the table that – because Ray Thornton, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them, and I know you're not either, but it's like Jacoby Jones and Ray Thornton, they're almost like finished products to some degree. Like they're here to be showcased, and hopefully they have an uptick with Bo Davis and the way they're being developed and whatnot in PK, but they're here for a reason in this situation too. Right. And they haven't yet shown that you can just game plan for them and they still wreck your game plan. That's what I'm looking for.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah, Prince Dorbah. I'm glad you brought up Ovia Gofu as well. Look, the Texas coaching staff, they knew early on that they needed some help at linebacker and at edge, and they tried to address it in the transfer portal. Ray Thornton, obviously one of those guys, Gofu, one of those guys. We'll see what happens with Ben Davis. I actually need to kind of dig on that situation a little bit. I feel like we haven't heard his name in a while. But, yeah, I mean, that's a position of some concern for me. And once again, none of those guys individually is going to replace Joseph Osai, but the hope is there's not like a tremendous drop-off with this defensive front just because Joseph Osai is in the National Football League. But I love this coaching staff. I love PK. I love Bo Davis. Hopefully those guys can figure it out.
Do you think that Alfred Collins can develop into the guy that at least grabs the attention? Not necessarily, like obviously he's not going to play on the edge, but I do think he has versatility where he can play, depending on what type of situation you're in, he can play in and out.
Yeah.
And at least develop the attention that 46 was getting before.
Yeah, Pete Kwiatkowski runs a very multiple defense, and a lot of coaches say they're multiple on defense, but PK actually is multiple on defense.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll see plays where you'll see plays where he only has 2 defensive linemen on the field at the same at one time. So I do think Alfred Collins can be an impact player. I think you can line him up as a 1 tech if you needed to. I mean, Keandre Coburn sort of fits that role more than Alfred Collins does, but I think you can line up Alfred Collins in a number of different spots. Now, look, he's over 300 pounds, Steven. So, the assumption is he's not that fast and maybe can't get off the ball as quick as a 250, 260-pound guy can. But, shoot, looking at that dude's film in high school and looking at what he did last year as a true freshman, part of me thinks he does have that ability, despite his size, to be one of those guys who can get off the ball very, very quickly and maybe make some things happen from the outside. So, I don't know how often he's going to be lined up anywhere outside of the 3 tech, but man, that seems to be one of those game-breaking type of players where it doesn't matter where you line him up. He's going to find a way to make some stuff happen. I'm really, really excited to see what type of role he has in Pete Kwiatkowski's defense.
I agree. And Vernon Broughton has those capabilities as well when he came in. I remember the Under Armour All-American game. He lined up in and out as well. And I think, when you have 2 people like that are very versatile, that are 3 techs, I can run some games, have them on the same side. Kind of like the Watt Clowney stuff they used to do with the Houston Texans. There's some things you can do, and I think you have the coaching staff that's not going to be stubborn and keep things at bay. And I'm not really referring to Chris Ashes, more so Todd Orlando when he got stuck with his lightning package and he wouldn't get out of it, even though he didn't have the pieces that fit, and he kind of ruined Bimage and Brecken Hager and some of those guys that are just completely miscast. I think there's better tools here up front to where when he wants to get cute at times, he can get away with it and generate something explosive for the defense, because that's going to lead to the help that the secondary is going to need. How do you feel about the corners and safeties and how this whole thing plays out? Because there's one particular position that I'm really, really, really looking at even come this Saturday.
Yeah, making this a spring game preview episode of this show, of this channel, I'm looking for DB play as a whole, but more specifically, how the defensive backs react when the ball is in the air. That's been a huge problem for the Texas secondary over the last few years, right? I mean, even though Josh Thompson and Deshaun Jameson are returning starters and they've started a lot of games in their college careers, they also have had those moments where they kind of panic when the ball's in the air, or they get a little bit too handsy when the ball's in the air, or they don't turn around when the ball's in the air. And that has led to some problems for the Texas secondary in the past. So I'm looking specifically for that, right? Hopefully the Terry Joseph, Blake Gideon combination in the secondary can help improve that, to where these DBs just don't panic when the ball is in the air. I'm not entirely sure what to make of the secondary right now. I'm really not. Texas loses its 2 starting safeties, and Steven, I would argue that Chris Brown was this defense's second best player last year behind Joseph Osai. I don't think anybody saw that coming going into the 2020 season, but he just got better and better and better as the year went on. I know he rubbed some people the wrong way with the flexing he did.
Hey, flex on him, CV.
I know. And it's like, dude, you just gave up a 15-yard pass play for a first down. What the hell are you doing flexing right now? But he went from, okay, that annoying guy, that weird guy who's flexing all the time, to, oh my God, this guy's really, really good. And now
he's showing up every week.
Exactly. And now I'm worried how Texas is going to replace him. Caden Stearns had his moments. His freshman year was so good. First team All Big 12. Freshman All-American 3 years ago. He was awesome. In the last 2 years weren't the same. Injuries probably a part of that. I'm honestly not sure if Caden Stearns was 100% invested in last season as well. But look, he still, you knew he was a starter and you knew what he was capable of. So replacing those guys is going to be tough at safety. I think you have some pieces there, but who steps up, right? BJ Foster seemingly has one of those positions on lockdown, but, is Jaron Thompson, is he good enough? Is Tyler Owens good enough? I mean, who is going to be that other safety for this football team? And then at corner, Josh Thompson and Deshaun Jameson, once again, they started every game for you last year, but they can be better. They can definitely be better.
They need to be better.
Yeah, they need.
I would challenge them to be better, 100%.
Yeah, and Darian Dunn coming in, the grad transfer from McNeese State, like where is he at? Is he good enough to where he could potentially take one of those starting jobs away from Thompson or Jamison? And then at nickel with Adam Moore and Cook. Like, my point is, you've got a lot of talent there. Like, on paper, Tom Herman and his staff did a hell of a job recruiting DB talent to Texas. So you've got a lot of 4- and 5-star players in that defensive backfield, but some guys without experience and more guys who just haven't been that consistent, Steven. So the hope is that those secondary coaches, once again, can kind of unlock that potential and maximize the talent that hopefully is still there within those guys. But, man, for me, I'm not too confident or too optimistic about Texas returning into DBU this fall with what I've got right now.
All right, this is something I want to say, and I know it's not going to be popular. We got to cut the DBU stuff out, and no disrespect to Rob Babers, that's the homie, that's your coworker, your brother over there at the triple option. I'll go ahead and plug it right now. I love Rod, but the DBU stuff right now, I'm not saying over the past few years or whatever, but this is where we can get a little out of hand as Texas fans, where we have blinders on to what's going on in the rest of the country. You can't say that right now with what's going on at LSU and Bama and Ohio State and what these people are turning out on an annual basis and how they're recruiting and then how they're spinning and developing people into the NFL. Right. That's just facts, okay? So, but can we get to the point where BJ Foster, I'll start with him, because he's a player I really, really like the way he plays for what he's asked to do. Can he stay healthy? That's really been one of my biggest issues with BJ. And I think emotional maturity, I think he'll be fine there. I know we had some issues with him before that was crazy, but for all intents and purposes, he's been locked down at the boundary so much that they felt the need that they could spin down Tyler Owens, which a lot of people were excited to see getting in there at linebacker. We didn't touch on him at linebacker because in the scrimmages, he's still playing safety. So, it is what it is, which I think personally, he still needs to get reps there because of BJ's injury concerns. But if BJ is healthy, and I get the BJ Foster that played in the OU game, that at least gave it left it on the line, and the uptick you're looking from him is to get to the route of consistency that was shown from Chris Brown, and an improvement and uptick when he is challenged in the pass game. The reason why Chris Brown was so successful last year, and he was voted second team All Big 12 for those who don't remember, and that's with the great safeties at TCU that are in the NFL draft this year, and the safety play that Iowa State got. Chris Brown was there. That's how good he was grading out, even Pro Football Focus grades, right? BJ's got to play the ball a little bit better, but we know he can be at least that enforcer and bring that physicality. Jaron Thompson seemed to be a magnet to the ball when he got in there, to the point where it was like, wow, he's getting the balls that Caden Stearns wasn't getting to. I think that's something to keep an eye on. My guy Schooley, though. Well, hey.
We haven't pulled his scholarship yet, have we? I'm just making sure Tran didn't make a call down to the UT offices and say, hey, I saw that Bijan highlight. We can't have this guy anymore.
Yo, BK, Tran going to be at the game on Saturday with his binoculars looking right at 14.
Yep.
Right at 14, just like stay away from 5.
He doesn't care stay away from 5. He doesn't care about the quarterback competition, man. He's all about the safety competition. He's all about figuring out where Brendan Schooler is going to be come the fall, man.
Oh man, I can't wait till we'll have Tran on. By the way, for when we go, hopefully live very, very soon with you guys. So throwing that out there.
There you go.
This next collab is going to be more interactive. So we'll plug that at the end. But Brendan Schooler was super productive as a freshman safety at Oregon, and we can't dismiss this. And I keep saying this, like, if they don't get what they see, he's playing. He's playing. And I'm not saying he's going to play well or anything like that, but when you have somebody that's picked off 4 passes, 70-something tackles in one season, those type of people figure out how to get on the field. And I've never been able to figure out why he moved to wide receiver. in the first place, but you got Schooley over there.
Yeah, and that scares me a little bit. And it's probably unfair to Brendan Schooler because he did play pretty well as a true freshman at Oregon at safety.
What's your concern? It's been years.
Just anytime there is a position change, and not just like going from safety to linebacker, like that makes me a little nervous. But I'm talking about offense to defense or defense to offense. It's like that worries me a little bit. So I know Brendan Schooler has some safety in his background, but like you said, it's been years. And like to me, that tells me, well, that means you don't feel good about the guys you have right now. You wouldn't be making that position change if you felt really, really good about Jaron Thompson, about B.J. Foster, about Tyler Owens, about your other safeties on this roster. So that scares me a little bit. I'll give some love to Brendan Schooler. The fact that he's been willing to switch positions multiple times over his collegiate career tells you the type of kid that he is, tells you the type of team player that he is. He's playing for the name on the front of the jersey more than the name on the back of the jersey. That's awesome. But, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have – it has something to do with the Bijan highlight. I'm not going to lie. But it also just the fact that, once again, he hadn't played that position in a while and he's transitioning from offense to defense. Like, that scares me a little bit. And that guy, Brendan Schooler, apparently is getting some run at Sam linebacker too. Like, he might be.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, like with Tyler Owens, you know, and it's probably good on paper that this coaching staff is cross-training guys because you might need that with your lack of linebacker depth this year. And I hope Pete Kwiatkowski does what I hope Steve Sarkisian does, and that's put his best 11 players on the field at the same time. So maybe we will see, I don't want to call it the lightning package because Todd Orlando's not here anymore, but maybe you'll see times where you've got 7, 8 defensive backs on the field at the same time if Texas feels like those are the best guys they have on defense. But, yeah, I just don't love hearing that Brendan Schooler is competing to be a starter right now.
Can we also specify that when we're talking about packages, that's what they need to be? They're specialized. That was one of my issues with Todd Orlando. A package that was created for a particular matchup or team became your full-time, your base. That's not your base.
No.
And I think that's something that needs to be established. Like Nick Saban was talking about this when he was talking about we needed to create a package where we had to get bigger for Notre Dame because Notre Dame was throwing out all them damn tight ends at us. We weren't going to stay in our base nickel. That makes sense to me. But that didn't mean that they were going to go and then play Ohio State out of the package. It's a package for a reason, football fans. I know people know this, but I just needed to say it because it was something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up when you start talking about the Lightning package and how that evolved into what it shouldn't have evolved to. Mm-hmm. So
I'm not sure if Tom Herman or Todd Orlando knew that. It sounds obvious, right? You got to scheme based on your opponent. You've got to come up with different game plans every week to try to give yourself favorable advantages against the team you're playing against. But unfortunately, with the last coaching staff, we didn't see that very much. The track record for Sark and for PK tells you that we're going to see that a lot more. I mean, we talked about a few minutes ago how multiple Pete Kwiatkowski's defenses have been over the years. That's not just because he wants to have fun. It's because, he sees things that he can exploit and expose in opposing offenses. Like he sees places where he could take advantage of the opposition, and he's done that over the years. I mean, he wants to have a confusing defense. He wants to make life miserable for the opposing quarterback. He wants to make it very, very tough to diagnose what his defense is going to do. So the multiplicity that we're going to get from Pete Kwiatkowski, it isn't just a bit. That's something that has helped him become one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. So
completely agreed.
He's going to have his work cut out for him, Steven. I mean, I said this earlier, and I agree with it. Like, Pete Kwiatkowski has had less talented defenses than this Texas defense, right? Like Texas, despite not having a ton of proven commodities on that side of the ball this year, and by the way, that's not like an opinion, that's a fact. Texas has the least amount of returning production in the Big 12 this year. And we ran down the checklist of defensive guys who aren't going to be on this year's team that were on last year's team. So there are a lot of holes to replace and a lot of unproven commodities on defense. But still, on paper, in terms of recruiting talent, this Texas defense more talented than a lot of the defenses that Pete Kwiatkowski has worked with in the past, but he's been able to get the most out of those defenses. He's been able to not only game plan for opponents, but game plan for his own team. Like self-evaluate and realize what he has on his defense and scout his own personnel to do stuff that maximizes
your limitations.
Exactly. Know your limitations and do what you have to do to maximize your skill set. So, man, if it was Todd Orlando coaching this defense with all the questions, I wouldn't feel great. Chris Ash, I'd feel a little better, but Pete Kwiatkowski, he's the guy that gives me the most confidence out of anybody, player or coach, that this defense has a chance to not take a big step back this year and still be one of the best in the Big 12.
You guys hear that take? That's why I need to go subscribe to BK right now. That's why y'all need to be tuning in to the triple option, because you don't get that type of passion. I mean this sincerely. I'm not just trying to plug. You don't get that type of passion and insight from somebody who is, doing this after hours, just hanging out with me talking so we can reach more of you guys that are just hungry for Texas content. There's 2 points I want to make, BK. Number one, with Chris Ash, I thought he had a unique job from the standpoint of it was almost like the PTSD from the Todd Orlando experience and trying to get back to the basics. And I think and then dealing with COVID, like we can't dismiss that enough, right? Mm-hmm. So you have those things working at it, and they had to go so vanilla at the very beginning just to say, you know what, this quarter's for, like, we're just going to learn how to tackle. We're going to go the rugby style stuff, like just bottom, like here's how to, and they were good teachers. They developed over time. Oscar Giles, Hutzler, all those guys, they did good work. I think with PK here, though, we got to get back to being that creative scheme. Like, that's not ultimately what's going to beat Lincoln Riley. Let's just be real. Like, the play callers that are in this conference and where you're trying to get to, because Oklahoma's thinking national championship this year, whether you like it or not. That this is the team, offensively, defensively, coming off that Florida, the bowl game, whether Florida had Kyle Pitts, all this stuff or not. Oklahoma did what they needed to do, right? And now you return to Spencer Rattler. You have all these guys. How do you combat that? Like, year one, I know this isn't you're coming in with these kids, but year one, you're trying to combat those type of guys. And so you're going to need to have that layer of scheme and different packages to combat those guys. Shout out to my boy, Texas Homer, who made the Pete Kwiatkowski video and really went into that deep dive. If y'all haven't seen that, please go check that video out to get more of the background of what we're talking about. But one of the layers I want to add on here, and Brad touched on it really, really briefly, was in the Pac-12, a lot of the confusion he was introducing. The flip side of that is that there's people in the Pac-12 like Mike Leach was there. I know he's at Mississippi State now. But you have Big 12 type teams over there. Yeah. You look at old boy at USC right now.
Graham Harrell?
Graham Harrell, right? He's running air raid over there. There's people in that conference running the same stuff we see here. It's just that y'all don't stay up late at night to watch Pac-12 after dark. That's the problem. See, that's why Justin Herbert was getting hated on, because y'all don't stay up to watch Pac-12 after dark. So you're like, oh, I didn't know he was good. Well, that's all you, not him, right? And so when you look at the Leaches and the Graham Harrells and these people running these things out there, he's seen that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not like they ain't sending people to the league too. Right? I'm not saying that they're as proficient offensively and dynamic as the Big 12. That's not my point, because I know somebody's going to come on here in the comments, Steve, there's a Pac-12 is soft, blah, blah, blah. No, that's the point is, that same Leach that won a natty at OU, that was running in Texas Tech and all that, they were holding it down up there at Washington. Now, the last point I want to make is my concerns, BK.
Mm-hmm.
My concerns is that PK was married with Jimmy Lake. And I know the background, but Jimmy Lake, essentially, you're taking Jimmy Lake out and you're inserting Terry Joseph. And I know Terry Joseph has a great rep from Texas A&M, has a great rep from Notre Dame. I'm concerned about that relationship in tying two people together from two different elements or two different schemes. That to me is going to be interesting to figure out. You're giving a bigger role to Blake Gideon now, which is also very, very interesting. So you have Blake Gideon, Terry Joseph. Of all the coaches on the staff, those are the two. I talked about Andre Coleman on the first, but Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon are the two coaches where I'm like, how is that gonna work?
Yeah,
because Jeff Cho and PK have that relationship, and we already know what we got with Bo Davis. He gonna be cold.
Mm-hmm.
But those two, that's what I'm worried about there.
That's fair. Yeah, neither of those guys is Jimmy Lake, and that is not debatable at this point. To your first point, Stephen, it's interesting. Let me rephrase that. It's important to note that the Big 12 is not all air raid anymore. Like, there are a lot of different offensive philosophies in this conference right now. Look at Matt Campbell at Iowa State. That's not an air raid. Look at what K-State does under Chris Kleiman. That's not an air raid. Kansas is considering hiring Todd Monken from Army. Like, they might be a triple option team next year. So this is not late aughts decade Big 12 where everybody is running the air raid. No, there's only a couple of teams in this league still running that type of offense. You've got Oklahoma,
Absolutely.
You've got Texas Tech now, and you've got TCU. It feels like those are your air raid teams in this league. But, dude, there's a lot of variety in this conference right now. So the reason I bring that up is, Pete Kwiatkowski, I'm glad you brought up that he's seen the air raid. That's good. That will help. But he's also seen a number of different offenses over his near decade at Washington. So this conference, like, you shouldn't just be like, oh, he only saw one or two air raid teams a year in the Pac-12. How is he going to handle it here?
It's lazy.
This is not the same Big 12 that we had 10 years ago. There's a lot more variety offensively in this conference, and I think PK is going to be able to handle that. So I feel great about that. But to your second point, that is an interesting point. Jimmy Lake, the right-hand man for Pete Kwiatkowski, now the head coach at Washington. Those guys together built one of the most consistent defenses in all of college football over the last decade. This is the first time we'll really see Pete Kwiatkowski without Jimmy Lake. So I think PK is going to be fine. But, it's fair to have questions about the secondary. We have questions about the personnel with this secondary right now, and I'm with you. Outside of Andre Coleman, those were the two most questionable hires that Texas made. And Terry Joseph has a pretty good track record. Like, if you look at his resume, he's coached at some big-time schools. But, man, some guys I talked to who cover Notre Dame said that Terry Joseph's rep wasn't that great up there. Like, he left a lot to be desired at Notre Dame. So I don't know if he's like an elite defensive backs coach right now. And I didn't love the Jay Valai hire last year. Like, to me, that guy was a little bit too unproven to get the job. And I almost feel that way about Terry Joseph and Blake Gideon at this point. So, I'm with you on that concern. That is a fair concern to have. Those guys have never worked together before. And people are going to have a magnifying glass on this secondary because it's not just you and me who had those doubts, Stephen. I mean, a lot of Longhorn Nation out there wasn't too thrilled with the Terry Joseph or Blake Gideon hires. So if those don't work out, people are going to be questioning Steve Sarkisian for those decisions.
As I said on RJ Young's channel a few weeks ago, the spring is full of strengths and question marks. There are no weaknesses. And I'm not saying Terry Joseph's a weakness. The weaknesses happen in the fall. That's where the weaknesses come up. That's when people get on the message board or call your radio show after the game and say, what the hell am I watching? Nobody does that in the spring. You just say, we have question mark. Got to work on this. And right now with Terry Joseph, it's a question mark. Blake Gideon is a question mark. Now, I'm confident with Blake Gideon that as a recruiter, I'm seeing some good things. I'm hearing good things on the recruiting trail. We know his father, former Texas high school football coach, the ties and stuff. I'm hearing really, really good things out there on the recruiting trail. But can he coach? Got to see it. And I like what I'm hearing even with the young boys. We didn't even mention J.D. Coffey and some of these other guys who are early enrollees who were getting praise from not just the coaching staff, but their peers. I think that's always good when they ask another player on the other side of the ball who's standing out to you, and somebody on offense is like, oh, yeah, that J.D. Coffey kid, he can hit, or he's pretty good. That's a good sign. I like stuff like that. So we're not saying people out there watching that they're weaknesses. The question marks.
Question marks. Well said right there. Also, Keaton Crawford. Heard some good things about him. Want to give him some
good
love.
Call out.
Another guy that I'll look out for this Saturday in the spring game. But, they're question marks. Exactly. We can't call these guys weaknesses just yet. And Blake Gideon's already done a great job on the recruiting trail. And I'm with you, dude. I don't doubt his chops on the recruiting front at all. And I love getting guys who played at Texas to coach at Texas. We know Blake Gideon's passionate as all get out about the University of Texas. And he's 100%. Going to be able to speak to the recruits about what it's like to be a student athlete at the University of Texas and all of the benefits that you can get from being a student athlete at the University of Texas. And Blake Gideon can use his own life as an example, right? Like, look at me.
What, four-year starter?
I'm in my low 30s right now, and I'm coaching at UT. So if you want to be a coach, you play here, you got an opportunity to work your way up pretty damn quickly. And I'm sure, yeah, he'll have his teammates call him and be like, yo, my teammate at 30 is doing this right now. He's a lawyer. He's a real estate agent. He's just killing it in his field right now. So, like, Blake Gideon is going to crush it on the recruiting front. He killed it at Ole Miss doing that. He's killed it everywhere he's been in terms of recruiting. I think he's going to do great at UT. And, yeah, he was a very, very good player during his time at Texas. People remember that one play. I hate to bring it up. I'm sorry. I'm about to pause the video to go throw up just even thinking about it. But he did a lot of good things at UT as well. So, I do think he can be a good piece for this team, but they are question marks, both he and Terry Joseph, without question. And the whole secondary for me, it's up in the air. Once again, Steven, we know there's talent there. Like, there's a chance if this secondary figures it out and if these coaches are aligned and they can get the most out of these guys, this secondary can be a real strength of this football team and be one of the best, if not the best secondaries in the Big 12. But we just don't know. We just don't know. You're replacing two starting safeties. The cornerbacks have been inconsistent. You've got a position battle at nickel with Chris Adamora and Anthony Cook. Like,
that's the one I'm looking at.
Yeah, you use question marks. I'm basically saying that in a long-winded way. Question marks everywhere in that secondary with personnel and coaching.
So I teased the position group I'm looking at in particular, and it was the matchup between Chris Adamora and Anthony Cook. Touching on the corners real quick, the Jamison Thompson thing, can they play complementary ball with the defense? Like, assuming they get the type of pass rush that we think they may be able to generate, or whether it's blitzing or naturally, organically, I should say, can they take – because Jamison didn't have a pick last year. And the type of corner he is, I need him to be more of that Asante Samuel playmaking. And I know he's more of a zone corner, but still having instinctively getting the ball in his hands as a former wide receiver. Josh Thompson, we've heard some good things about him getting the ball, in practice. Can that translate over to the game, to the field, or is Darian Dunn going to step in there? Because Darian Dunn, he got the old boy Tyler Wallace tape on, where he locked them up pretty good, right? So when you have people like that lurking, I think the competition is good, even with Keaton Crawford. The matchup, though, is that slot corner, nickel corner position, because it's critical in the Big 12. The role that Chris Ash wanted from that position was more of a linebacker type, and they seem to want more of the coverage, and it seemed to favor Anthony Cook early. Chris Adamora, we talked about, K. Brewer slimming down. Chris Adamora has done a great job. And that, to me, is also being a team player when it's like, oh, we need you to play this nickel rover type position, and you had to beef up to 215. But then the new staff gets here, and we're like, fine, I'll slim down. Like, people changing their body compositions just to give themselves the best chance to play. I give Chris Adamora a lot of credit because that is not an easy transition. Now, I hope it does not hinder him on the field going back and forth like that, because he is going to have to play a little bit more coverage. Is that somebody who becomes a candidate to move to safety? We don't know. So those are some things that I'm really, really, really interested to see. But that probably is the number one thing I'm looking at outside of the linebackers on defense. And we'll look, everybody's going to get monitored as we watch this thing multiple times. But that's what I'm looking at, BK.
Yeah. I'm curious what we see in the spring game on Saturday, right? Where do those defensive backs line up? How much run does each defensive back get with the ones? How much run does each defensive back get with the twos? But you're right. I mean, Pete Kwiatkowski is looking for more of that stereotypical defensive back in that nickel role, while Chris Ash was looking more for that hybrid linebacker. So by all accounts, there's been a lot of cross-training on this defense. And I think the positions that we're seeing cross-trained the most are nickel and safety. So I think Chris Adamora has gotten some work at safety. I think Anthony Cook has gotten a little bit of work at free safety as well. So maybe you get to the point where you feel good about having both of those guys on the field at the same time. Like maybe Chris Adamora is a safety for a play, and you've got Anthony Cook lined up as a corner. Like if you think those two guys are better cover guys than Jaron Thompson or Tyler Owens, then maybe in a third and long, obvious passing situation, both of those guys can be on the field at the same time. That goes to the multiplicity points that we were talking about earlier. So, man, I want Anthony Cook to be good so bad. I want all of these guys to be good, but Anthony Cook, a 5-star.
He's one of your pet cats.
I mean, it's been, I can't even imagine how frustrating it's been for him. It's been frustrating for us as fans, right? Anytime you get a 5-star, like you expect that dude to be a stud, to be an all-conference player, flirting with All-American status. And I'm sure Anthony Cook, hell, I don't know if you remember this, Stephen, when Anthony Cook announced that he was going to UT at one of the All-American games, he said, for the next 3 years, I'll be playing at the University of Texas. Well, it's year 4 for Anthony Cook. So we know he's pissed that he's still in college and he's still competing for a starting job. So, like, I can't imagine how frustrating it's been for him, the fact that he's had to go through this journey to get to this point. So I hope it works out for him, man. I mean, sometimes evals are wrong. Sometimes guys who are given a 5th star aren't 5-star players, and maybe that's Anthony Cook. But I just hope this coaching staff can finally get whatever Anthony Cook seemed to have had in high school out of him, and I want him to be a contributing piece to this team because we've seen flashes of brilliance from Anthony Cook, but obviously the consistency has been lacking over the first few years here in Austin. So hopefully it works out for him. Hopefully both of those guys can be impact players for this defense because I think both of them are very, very talented.
I think to your eval point, and this also speaks to the NFL, by the way, sometimes it's on the player, sometimes it's on the team, sometimes it's a little bit of both. And I'm not going to say it's 100% Texas or 100% Anthony Cook. I think this is a case where it's a little bit of both. But I will also say I'm surprised he's still here in a good way. I'm surprised that he stuck it out because, you know, we had a point where the brother left the program a little bit. And by the way, Steve Sarkisian last year was fine for me with people jumping in and out because of COVID and stuff. But as we start to normalize, I think he's going to be more like, I'm very gracious with you guys, and I treat y'all like adults, but you hit that portal, kick rocks. Because that's kind of what they do at Alabama. Like, we ain't going to talk you out of anything anymore. But with especially the political climate as well, totally understandable. But with Anthony Cook, I also look at it as the standpoint of he was miscast multiple times here in the defense. There were times where he played well and then inexplicably would get taken off the field, in my opinion. And, you know, other guys that were struggling in coverage would get more opportunities that really didn't make sense. And I feel like he's just now getting to a point where he's being asked to do some of the things that we saw him have success with that made you look at that eval of why he got what he got coming out of Houston Lamar. Shout out to Rob Babers again. So, you know, wrapping up the defense, this is wrapping up the defensive preview. The last thing I want to say, I want to plug 2 more things. Number 1, guys, I think the thing that we have to pay attention to is just the atmosphere. And we're not with the fans. We talked about the fans in the first video. More so talking about who's going to be back here. What type of environment are we going to have for the recruits? There's going to be a lot of recruits here on Saturday visiting. Hopefully the weather's good. I have not checked I don't have Weatherman Tran here for the forecast like he's always on top of. Shout out to Weatherman Tran. But hopefully it's a good environment. I felt like and it's a honeymoon phase, right, Brad, where anytime it's the initial coach, his first spring game, we're always gonna, you know, everything is good. But looking back even at Tom Herman the last couple spring games, it seemed to be kind of militaristic in an interesting way. You know, we're hitting and all this type of stuff. I'm curious to see what the atmosphere is like.
Yeah.
And I think that's something to really, really pay attention to pre-game, after the game. Just what type of team do we have? I feel like I'm getting an idea with some of the clips we're seeing from LHN, but I'm really curious to see, you know, what that looks like in person.
Yeah, and environment and body language, right? I mean, do these guys look like they're having fun? Hopefully that's the case. And by all accounts, Steve Sarkisian runs more of, I don't want to call it laid back because then people think it's they're not working hard or anything like that. But Steve Sarkisian just is more of a relaxed dude. He just gives off more of a relaxed vibe than Tom Herman did. I think everyone's heard the story about what Tom Herman did when he took the Texas job, right? The first meeting that he had with the Texas players where he's like getting in dudes' faces and yelling at them to sit the F up in their chairs. Like, Sark's not that type of guy. So I think the players gel with Steve Sarkisian better. Definitely they like Sark more than they liked year 4 Tom Herman. So, yeah, I'll be looking at the environment, the body language we see from these players too. I like that point. And I don't want to steal Weatherman Tran's bid. I hope he doesn't get pissed at me for doing this, but just took a quick look at Apple
Forecast
weather.
Brad.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Can I do this? I don't want to be known as Forecast Brad for the rest of my life. Can't have that follow me, man. I will say it's looking good. It's supposed to rain a lot on Friday, but Saturday, sunny and 84. Give me all of that. Now, I don't trust the weather guessers. I call them weather guessers. Apparently, they're meteorologists. They don't deserve an ology after their profession. They're wrong all the time. They're wrong more than I am, okay? Maybe it's envy. Maybe it's jealousy that I have towards the weather guessers, because that's the only profession where you can be wrong more than I can and you keep your job. I'm pissed at that. I'm pissed that they have that title. So just because we're recording this a few days out and it says it's going to be sunny and 84 on Saturday doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case, but I hope it is the case. We deserve this. We didn't get a spring game last year. I want to see what this team looks like. I know you do too, Steven. So hopefully the weather holds up for us.
Forecast Brad had to throw out the disclaimer, and on top of that, crap all over the meteorologist. Shout out to the homie Scott Fisher, who I think watches this channel. My wife sat next to him. But man, BK, you didn't have to crap on him. The last thing I'll say is this: next video we do is going to be a live. We're going to interact with you guys. I don't know, you're going to have media obligations day of spring, but you know, we'll find some time, and a good time for everybody to come together. We'll promote the heck out of it. Guys, remember, you see here below, Brad Kellner got a YouTube channel. Check it out. It's been a blessing to have you on, and it's been really fun just to chop it up, break down these teams. I know we didn't talk specials, but we kind of know what we got with, Dicker the kicker, and we're going to have one of the Australian dudes, punting the rock.
One of those guys, huh? Yeah. Hey, I will say this to give a special teams nugget. Apparently, Cameron Dicker has a chance to be this team's P1. Is that a thing? We do QB1. Do we do P1 for punter?
He did not punt badly.
No, he had to punt last year when Dutesky got hurt. So apparently Cameron Dicker's getting some looks as this team's #1 punter. So he might be one of those guys who kicks and punts. So maybe there is a competition in this special teams. But, yeah, you got a couple of Australians to work with there too.
Was Justin Tucker the last one to do both?
At Texas?
At Texas.
Did Anthony Farah punt at all? Am I making that up?
He came from Penn State, right?
Yeah, he was there for 1 year. He was
I think you're right.
Okay, he was like one of the better kickers in the country the 1 year he was here. But I think he punted too, if memory serves.
I thought the milk went bad when he got here, but I could be wrong. But he did. You're right. He did. I think he did do double duty full time.
Okay. So yeah, I guess he'd be the last guy to do that.
Interesting. We'll get to see, because Dicker did double duty in high school as well. So
good point. That is a good point. No, man, I appreciate you, man. You've given me all the plugs, all the shout outs over the couple of videos we've done. I can't thank you enough for that. But you're the king, man. You're the YouTube king for Texas Longhorn sports. So it's an honor to be a small part of this channel. I'm hoping we can get you to 10K sooner rather than later. You deserve it. You work your tail off all the time. Your content is unbelievable. So I appreciate the invite. I love this partnership. I'm excited about what we've done, but I'm even more excited about what we have coming for the people moving forward.
Absolutely. Guys, remember, horns always up. Thank you.